disaster recovery people have to take care of that type of building, and it's awful.
Yeah, it's not a job I want to do.
No. Mm-mm.
I don't want any part of it.
That would stink.
But, see what happens when he joins in?
Oh my gosh.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
All right, so today we have Ginger McCleish of Medical Oncology and Hematology in St. Louis. How's it going, Ginger?
It's going just fine, y'all.
It's fine,
listen
y'all.
to her trying to be a Southerner.
So we brought her on today to abuse her and get some real-world disaster recovery and business continuity information. Wow, that was a mouthful. So it seems that Ginger has experienced some things that a little outside the norm. You know, when we're talking about disaster recovery, a lot of people think about, this, what can happen or what might happen and how would I respond to that. But Ginger kind of has been thrown into the crux of some issues in her area around flooding. And so we're going to hear about all that. But before we dive into the story, Ginger, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Well, first of all, I have been a nurse for 40 years, and I have actually been working with Dr. Marconi. We're in our 32nd year. So I started out as just a nurse, and his wife was doing the billing and management of that. And over time, we grew, expanded, and so I've been office manager now for quite a few years, can't even count them. And we have 3 other RNs in the office besides our front office staff, a lab person, and we use medical billing consultants as our billing manager. So we've had a really good rapport with them for all these years, which is where I met Donna umpteen years ago.
Back in the day.
Yes, definitely back in the day. So yeah, the office is just a mile from my house, and we are an oncology office where we do probably most of our business is oncology. We do chemotherapy here. We also see a lot of blood disorders, and we do treat some of them. But the main crux of our business is oncology patients, and we treat all types of cancer patients here. Adults only, though. We do not see any children.
Yeah, it's hard enough to do cancer. I don't know how you guys do it, and I appreciate that you do and applaud you for what you go through to do it as many years as you have, but I can't even grasp the struggle it must be to do it with children.
I did it during nursing school, and I've been to a couple offices where they had children there, and it's hard, like you said, hard enough with adults. I just can't do it with kids. Yeah. And neither can Dr. Marconi. It's just too hard.
Well, you managed to give Bill a plug, and you Dr. Marconi, rather, a plug, and NBC. That was pretty good. And then you've been working with us for like 20 years, which that says a lot that you've been a nurse for 40 years. And
Did you put it with Donna for 20 years says a lot.
It's because I'm just irresistible.
You are. What the heck? You've saved us countless number of times. So
well, I just grow on you. I have the patience and tenacity of a weed.
But also I am now on the board of directors for a group that is called SOAP, which is the Southern Oncology Association of Practices. And our practice here in St. Louis, Missouri is actually the furthest north practice. Everybody else is underneath us, and it ranges from coast to coast. And I believe now we have about 75 different practices that are in SOAP, and it is an amazing group of physicians. It is all private practice offices, and we have conferences once a year, and then 2 or 3 times a year we will have mini conferences in certain different areas. And it is by far probably the best resource that private practices can have when they are part of this group.
Awesome.
There's a lot of good things that come out of this, because we have different contracts with different companies, with drug companies and sponsorship and stuff with them. So it's just a really good group, and I'm very happy that I'm now on the board with them.
And you're about to have a big meeting, right?
We're having our big meeting actually this month. It'll be in Memphis. It's a 2-day meeting.
All right. So, and if you're interested in soap, we'll have we'll have a link to it on the website for this episode. So let's talk about why you got suckered into joining us on this, because you wrote this great article. Now, first of all, we do help you with your compliance, so we help you worry about these things. And sometimes, and you do compliance with us in your single doc office. I'm just pointing that out. It can be done in a small office.
Yes, it can.
But you wrote this great article in the SOAP newsletter about something that we knew was going on and have been talking with you about. But once you wrote that article, it was just a perfect thing for us to have to discuss the issue under disaster recovery and this experience. So just to kind of set the stage, if you weren't paying attention during the holidays, St. Louis flooded. It's like really, really bad. Major highways closed. New Year's was, y'all didn't get to have much of a New Year's at all.
We did not.
Sewage treatment plants are shut down, as well as water treatment plants. Things are not going well. It doesn't smell good. It's a good time to take a trip and just deal with it when you get back. But you couldn't do that, right? Because what did you learn during this major crisis throughout the entire area of St. Louis that went on from the rain started on December 23rd. I guess the pinnacle of the flooding was New Year's Eve.
It was New Year's Eve day. We actually had rain for 5 straight days. It was just amazing. We've never had that here before. And St. Louis is notorious for flooding, but that's usually in the spring or early summer and maybe early fall, but never in the middle of winter. So
that's right. It snows then.
It snows, but it was really warm. And so we had rain. It was awful. Plus the fact we had all of our children and grandchildren at our house over the Christmas holidays. And we had not been together like that for quite a few years. So it was great. But we couldn't do anything outside because it was raining the entire time. So our kids had to leave to go back to their prospective cities and their jobs. And a normal course of a travel for, say, our kids going back to Kansas City, 4 hours ended up taking them close to 10.
Wow.
Multiple detours, road closures, that sort of thing. Our Texas kids, it took them 18 hours to get home back to Dallas. It was just awful. So in the course of all that, my husband's business is in Fenton, and that is where you have 2 of the rivers come together. And it floods, but not too bad. Well, this year, unfortunately, they knew that it was going to flood bad, so they started getting some things out of their office. They are, thank God, on the 2nd floor of a building, which has never flooded in the entire time that it's been in Fenton, but they managed to get some of their things out, and they were in the back of people's cars and vans. Long story short, the water treatment plant went, the sewage treatment plant went, and within a 4-hour time span, there was 10 feet of water in the building along with sewage.
Wow.
So when we went from our home, maybe a mile or so away, the water was, we just couldn't believe how high up it came. And Mark looked at me and he said, well, I'm sure the office is gone. And there was absolutely no way Mark could get to the office because by then all the major highways except for one were closed down. Plus, obviously, all the secondary roads, there was no way you could get on that. So the office came to our basement of our home.
Plan B.
Well,
So wait, the first thing I want to point out is just because you're on the second floor doesn't mean you don't have to worry about flooding. Let's make that point.
oh, let me tell you.
You know, there's people that would rank that as something they don't have to worry about, but that's not true.
Oh, that is not true at all. Because A, how are you going to get into the building? And even if you could get into the building, how are you going to get to the second floor? Because you've got sewage and water on the stairs. The elevator does not work. And there's no power. There's no water to the building. And what happens when the temperature is roughly 40 to 50 degrees and you've got a building full of water and sewage? You are going to have mold, and mold will start growing within 24 hours in those buildings. So now you're up on the second floor and you're an insurance brokerage company. So everything is on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are you going to do? You've got no power. You've already have mold starting growing in this building. And where are you going to go?
Exactly. So you go to Ginger and Mark's basement.
You go to Ginger and Mark's basement and you turn 2,100 square foot basement into an office for 10 people with multiple PCs, at least 2 monitors apiece, and their server was in our laundry room.
Don't mess up the washing machine.
Well, you know, you have to unplug half the stuff to do the laundry. But anyway, that is what they did. And just the checklist that they had to do to even get their business up and running on the first business day after the first of the year was phenomenal. It took a couple of days behind the scenes to actually get the office up and running in our basement. So you're in your home and we don't have the best internet access that they need. And then there's the whole issue with your phones. I mean, their business is obviously, you know, on the phone, on the computer. And it was just amazing to see, though, how everybody came together to make this work. So we had IT out there. We had phone people out there. We actually, I think, had some inspectors out there that they knew, but we made it work. Obviously, my husband and his brother and sister-in-law and the rest of them, I mean, they have to work. So what are you going to do? So they did make it work, and they were in our house for about 3 weeks before they found temporary digs.
And they're still in them, right? Here we are, April.
Yes, they are in their temporary digs, and hopefully the new place will be ready sometime later this month or next month. And they are fortunate that they are one of the few people in Fenton that actually found an extra place to, you know, buy or rent and convert it over into a working space for them that's not in a floodplain.
Nice. Not in the floodplain. Clear.
Yes.
So what did that make you do thinking about your office, Ginger?
Well, I was totally overwhelmed because I sat here at my desk and I looked at Dr. Bill and thought, I said, what would we do if this happened to us? And I said, how are we going to, you know, answer phones? How are we going to get to the computer? I said, but mainly, how are we going to take care of patients? I mean,
it's about patient care. It's the
all
number one
about
thing.
patient. And I said, you know, what do we do? So we sat down and, you know, after obviously making just a few jokes to lighten up everything, he's like, well, what we would have to do probably would be to hopefully rent space either from the hospital, he said, or another physician practice that could actually help us manage our cancer patients. So basically, we would have to call another oncology office and say, hey, if we ever had issues like this, you know, which happened to my husband's business, I said, would we be able to, you know, rent space from you until, you know, our office was cleaned up, whatever. So,
and you could set it up as a quid pro quo. You know, okay, we'll be your colo, you be ours kind of thing. So.
Exactly. And so he actually did talk to a couple of other physicians. And, you know, the problem is when the disaster is happening, everybody wants to do something, you know, and while it's still fresh in their mind. And, you know, but then after a month, the water recedes, the treatment plant comes back on, the water comes back on, people have gotten things fairly cleaned up, then they don't want to think about it anymore. Mm-hmm. But when you look back at those pictures and I think back what we did for the 2 and 3 weeks that they were at our office, in our home. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we really do have to seriously think about this. So we did. I mean, and it's obviously still a huge work in progress because, like I said, most people that it's never affected them, they have a hard time, with the whole concept of this. But in reality, it's a huge deal around here. Luckily for where our office is based, the problem of us flooding is very minimal, but it wouldn't have to be flooding. I mean, it could be anything. We could have an earthquake here or whatever, and we would still have an issue. So what we are planning to do is, of course, we need to talk to the lawyers and stuff about all this also, but would be to rent space from another physician who also is an oncologist who could help us handle our patients, and we'd still be able to, treat those patients. In lieu of that, what we would physically have to do would be to send our patients to the hospital outpatient to have their treatments done. So it's a huge, huge, huge deal.
So here's what we're saying is that you have learned that you have to worry about the computers and the internet. Of course, your main applications, how are you going to get to those? Where are those stored? Because do you have a server? How's it going to go? Do you need it in the laundry room? Phones, because people have to be able to connect to you there as well. Patient treatment space, right? And the staff's ability to get to work. Does that pretty much cover most of the things you learned?
It is, because, I was laying in bed at night when I wasn't sleeping, thinking like I was just picturing our patients coming to my basement getting chemotherapy. And it just, it wasn't pretty. But it's like, what, really, what do people do? So, I honestly don't think that would even be an option. I mean, there's so much HIPAA wise. I mean, there's just, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. All the stuff in the background that other people who are not in this type of industry would have no clue about what we were doing or how we would take care of this. So,
well, yeah, because once you manage all of that, and you have to have all hands on deck, or at least a plan for how you're going to implement all of these things that are your plan, you also need to make sure that in your plan, you figure out how you're going to maintain OSHA, privacy and security. Where are all of my forms? You just think about the forms alone. How am I going to see patients that need to have paperwork done? Those kind of things. So it's you using a billing service. It made things a lot easier, but for your plan. But if you were also having to file claims and all these other things, you're looking at a long list of things that you have to do. So I'm glad that you became more focused on this. I'm sorry for the reason that you became more focused on it, but at least it was through osmosis. I mean, you lived through it, but not because it was your practice. Right. You lived through it because it was your family. But, when we look at and talk to people, before we've tried, I'm sure we've had discussions prior to this about disaster recovery and business continuity, which are two different things, right, David?
Oh yes.
So, yeah, there's disaster recovery, which means how do I put my business back together? And business continuity is how I keep my business running. So it's two different things, because you also, while you're maintaining this temporary site, you now also have to work on getting your steps cleared of sewage, right, Ginger?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Steps cleared of sewage, just the whole recovery process of a building that has to be done outside people actually have to take care of that. Disaster recovery people have to take care of that type of building, and it's awful.
Yeah, it's not a job I want to do.
No. Mm-mm.
I don't want any part of it.
That would stink.
See what happens when he joins in.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me just say that at least it was winter time and it wasn't in the summer where it was 95 degrees with the sun shining every day. Or it would have been worse. A lot worse.
Oh. Just the thought of that.
I have to give Ginger props though for seeing the disaster and not just going, "Ooh, I'm glad it didn't happen to us," and then kind of going about our business. Because I think that's what happens a lot of times is, especially if it's not something like she had to live through it, because her husband was involved. But, it could be somebody across town or in another state or whatever. And you think, wow, man, that's terrible. And then you just go on about your business. Whereas she kind of took it and said, yeah, that's terrible. But what would we do if it happened to us? And I think that if you look at that, if practices look at that, if they read about, let's say a laptop gets stolen, and instead of making a comment about it, they go, okay, how can we avoid this happening to us?
Which is why we're interviewing you today, is we're hoping people will do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, even, practices here in St. Louis that were technically not affected by the flood, I mean, to them, it's like, okay, well, the cleanups happen. It didn't happen to me. So it's, no big deal. Life goes on as usual. But, there's people that we know, there's family that we know that are still, I mean, it's 4 months out and they're still affected by it. I mean, there's still buildings that are condemned there that they probably are just going to have to, tear them down completely. And a portion of that town's going to be completely rebuilt.
Wow.
Yeah.
See. So it's a bigger picture look at things because, a lot of people will say, prior to this, when we talk about disaster recovery, and you would say, well, we don't have to worry about a lot. That's where it starts because we don't do our billing here and we treat the patients here, but I guess that could go to the hospital, but you feel like it's not that big of a deal until you get into the details of what would actually need to happen. And that requires using imagination. So, or seeing it up close and personal when you're trying to do your laundry.
Exactly.
It's like, I know you're processing some applications, but I need underwear. So it's something, and it's like there's a lot of people after Hurricane Katrina that never went back to New Orleans. There's a reason, because it took so long for them to go back. They'd already established life somewhere else. So think about your patients establishing a relationship somewhere else. What are you going to do then? Your staff establishing a relationship somewhere else because it took so long to come back. Maybe you never come back. And that happens to a lot of businesses because they don't have a plan. So a plan, and now we're writing these things down and making checklists, aren't we, Ginger?
Oh, believe me, we are.
It's wonderful how focus changes after disaster up front and personal. We actually have some other folks that have dealt with the arson in their office burning down, literally burning down overnight. So there's a lot of things you have to worry about. And I'm sure with an insurance company, their insurance coverage for this stuff should have been very good.
It was.
I'm going to assume that to be the case, but isn't that something else that should be on your list of plan ahead? Because you're going to need that insurance coverage because you don't sit around with the cash flow to manage all these expenses, right?
No, it would be a huge financial burden if you did not have the right insurance policy, for any type of disaster. And I think that would probably be the biggest thing is why businesses would fold because they just don't have the cash flow,
Yeah.
So yes, you need to be on a first name basis with your insurance man or lady.
I know you are.
Yeah. I get great deals. But you do. I mean, and a lot of people don't really pay any attention to those insurance policies. It's like, oh, yeah, it's standard policy. Everybody does it. Where is my insurance policy? Where do we keep all that? Does Dr. Bill even know what our, insurance policy covers? So,
okay, wait, I got to know, does he?
He does now.
That's good.
After the whole fiasco with Mark's business, it really did make us both, sit up and say, okay, we really do need to think about this a lot and, do something about it. So, but boy, those checklists, they just keep getting longer and longer and longer because you do one thing and then you think of something else and you write it down and you go, oh my gosh. So But let me tell you though, still having that dream with, seeing patients being treated in our basement. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I mean, because most people don't know what it takes to actually treat a cancer patient. It's not just the patient, the family's here, you've usually got one or two people. So I was just like, oh my gosh, because we can treat quite a few people in a day's time. And I'm thinking, how are we going to do this? We can't do this at my house. So it's just so much to think about. It's overwhelming, very overwhelming.
Well, we'll call it very overwhelming, but that's why we make a plan. And,
right.
One of the HIPAA security rule requirements is to have a disaster recovery business continuity plan written down. And while a lot of people write it down originally, they make that list, but it's when you make that secondary list, the actual, how am I going to do this, that you really grasp how big this problem is. And the things that you need to plan for go beyond things like I'm in a floodplain, because, if there is a tornado, your office could be flooded.
Right.
If there are major power outages, we've had people where the transformer was hit in a car accident, knocks out a whole area's power. What do you do? Fire. We talked about that already. Plumbing issues. Had a client who the pipes above the server burst overnight over the weekend, made it even better. And they come in and they had records back there that they were transferring to the server sitting there. The only thing that saved the server is they had the routers and switches mounted above the server in the little kit there, and they were blown, but the server sitting there happily like it had an umbrella. And, but big chunks of plaster sitting on top of those devices is what would have hit the server because it was off the ground and covered by something. But we really got their attention at that point about let us do some other things to protect these devices. So there's so many things to worry about. And now you think about, we had, when I tell people you should worry about sewage issues, and you made it very clear. What can happen with sewage? But and I tell this story because this is really what happened. If you're in an older building and you get this, because while your building isn't as old as some, it is still not a brand new building.
Right.
And I'm sure this could happen with a brand new building. But I was in an older building in college. Our dormitory was. And all of a sudden, in those older buildings, you see those gold plates on the floor. That's where the pipes run underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our dorms, those pipes one morning just exploded when everybody was getting ready for class because this huge old tree had grown through and blocked the sewage pipes downstream from the dorm. So the dorm, it basically just blew those things off, and sewage was all up and down the first floor. So it can happen in ways that, the pipe over the server, the sewage, under the building, and there's a tree outside you don't even know you should worry about. That there's a lot of those kind of things, exploding furnaces and water heaters. And then there's things like, what if you learned your water at your practice was lead tainted like Flint, Michigan did? What are you going to do there, Ginger?
Well, after I would break down and cry for a little bit. Wow. I mean, really, where do you start? Do you you're not going to use the water there. We'd have to get bottled water in, but how do you handle that? You have to contact all the patients, all the staff. Everybody's going to have to be tested. I mean, you would physically have to pick up and move to someplace else that had a decent water supply.
Yeah, or truck in big amounts of water. But, you're in a medical building, so at least maybe you could work together to bring water in that's good water and not have to move. So, but those are kinds of things that they're out there for you to see and learn about. And all you have to do is apply what would happen to you.
Exactly.
What was it? It was a few years ago in some parts of the country. that it snowed so much, roofs collapsed. That's a whole different problem, and then there's vandalism where they just come in and tear everything up or steal things, or what about a viral outbreak? Those kind of things. So all of your staff is ill, and then your patients are ill. What are you going to do? Because your patients need care. Remember, it's still about patient care. That's David's favorite part. He gets to say that tagline. Hit it, Dave.
I created the tagline.
I got away with saying Dave. Oops.
I know. We'll talk about that later.
Well, it is April Fool's Day.
Oh man, and I didn't get you. So that's okay. I got till midnight.
I was gonna start with, this is our last Help Me with HIPAA podcast, and then say April Fools. So, but one more thing. I mean, I think we've really tried to drive home the message that you've got to start writing these things down. And yes, the checklist will get overwhelming, but you need to keep going. And, once you build one about how to move your computers, okay, that one would apply in a lot of spaces, and then you build one about dealing with your phones, so you take all of those things you have to worry about and you deal with them on a one-off. And then you look at the disasters and say, okay, what applies here and what would we have to adapt? So that's just my opinion. But
and you can't do this by yourself. I mean, you have to have help doing this. You've got to have other resources that you can go to help you do this. Mm-hmm. So I'm plugging you and Carla,
It's the Cardon plug.
Exactly. I couldn't do this by myself. There's no way. I wouldn't get any sleep for, a few weeks, but you do have to rely on other people, and you have to ask for help in any way you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause it when there's a disaster, it requires a lot of people.
Right.
It takes a village. All right. But since you're in oncology, and there was big oncology news that just came out, I had to throw this one out here, because we have talked about the Internet of Things and medical devices being on your network, and how those devices aren't being paid attention to, and they are a huge vulnerability, which this one news story will let us go back and maybe do a whole nother episode on that. But the Pyxis, and that's the way you pronounce it, right? Yes. Pyxis. Mm-hmm. It's a drug inventory cabinet it allows you to control your inventory and to keep up with making sure only the people that are supposed to get the drugs do get the drugs, and who they're giving them to. And so you actually go enter the patient information, what drugs you want, boom, out they come. And you manage the inventory in this cabinet, which is connected to your network.
Correct.
And the news just came out, and it was actually a cyber emergency response team alert that the Pyxis systems were found to have 1,400 vulnerabilities. That's right. So if you're in oncology and you have one of those, better be checking out what can be done to protect your network and figure out how you can segment it off by itself, if nothing else. So there's the plug on that, since we're on oncology. So what else we want to talk about, David?
I don't know. I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah, see, this is one where you just kind of sit back and hand over. Cool. Clearly, Ginger knows what to talk about. We don't.
We're going to have her back on after she actually tests the plan that she's putting in place.
She doesn't want to test it.
I'll be quite honest with you. No, nobody wants to do that. No.
No. But we can have Ginger back on after she gets further down the road and really nails down her plan, and she can talk about all of the things that are in it. I mean, there's plenty in it now that you've already talked about, the checklist and how you're going to do this, and negotiations and legal and all of this. But I think we may have completed this without either one of us saying something that when you've been friends and partied together for 20 years, you sometimes slip up and say. Several just leapt to my mind.
Martinis and olives. What can I say?
Oh, God. We have to make sure the other Ginger listens just to hear that part.
I know. I know.
All right, well, David, take it away.
I will take it away. Anyway, Ginger, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, it was great being able to spend all this time talking with you or listening to you. I can't. But anyway, so that's the podcast for today. Thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget that you can, first of all, go over to your favorite social media platform and share this out and let all your friends and family listen to it. Review us on iTunes. You can catch us on our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Don't forget, we have some newly released training courses there. So if you're interested in getting some training for your practice, whether you're a covered entity or a business associate, we have our very own training courses there now. So you can get those. And I think that's about it. Anything else you want to add, Donna?
No.
Caught you.
I was thinking about something else, but I'm not going to say it. It is April Fool's, you know. I was trying to come up with something, but I wasn't fast enough.
All right. So anyway, for Donna, myself, remember that HIPAA is not about compliance. It is about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.